This is the Expanding Boundaries podcast.
Do you feel trapped? Stuck in a world of mediocrity, constrained by bad habits, limiting beliefs, and feeling unfulfilled? Do you feel that deep down you know you were destined for much more? In Expanding Boundaries, you'll discover how you can break free and step into your real life, a life without limits. And now, here's your host, Michael McLeish.
Hello again to all our listeners out there. As you know, we just launched the Expanding Boundaries podcast late last year. And if you've been listening and finding value in these episodes so far, could you do me two favors? First off, just share the show with a friend or somebody that you think would find value in what we're sharing here. And number two, if you are indeed finding that value, would you hop on iTunes and just leave a quick review? Good, bad, and ugly. I'd love to hear it. And that'll really help us get the message out to more people and help our audience grow. So thank you again for listening. Thank you so much for your support. All right. So that said, let's get moving and meet our guest today. I've been looking forward to this show for some time, and it's an honor and a privilege to have him joining us today. This individual has personally made a profound difference in my life. And I mean, not just in one way. I'm talking physically and maybe more importantly, mentally. And not only that, he's doing the same for my two boys and for dozens of men, women, and children in our community here. So I hope that all of you listening will lean in and enjoy this conversation today. So Tyler Larsen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a cool conversation. I'm really excited. So you mentioned that you were born in Nevada. You grew up in Michigan, and then at the age of 18, you moved here to Colorado and began your journey in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in 2011. So I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff and fast forwarding to today. You're now a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, and you are now the owner and head coach of Kraken Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu here in Colorado Springs. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Oh man, I know we covered a lot of ground in that statement, so that's pretty exciting. Well, again, thanks for being here. Before we dive into those details that I want to unpack, I'd like to just share with you, or I guess get a few icebreaker questions here that we ask our guests often. What's one place in the world that you have to visit at some point in your lifetime?
I would have to say the one thing that always draws me is the Colosseum in Rome.
Colosseum. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's, kind of goes along with the whole, martial arts, warrior mindset type, just to, I don't know. Sometimes I just think about how cool would it be. I don't think you can do it anymore because it's such a tourist destination, but how cool would it be to go stand in the middle of that Roman Colosseum by yourself and just feel the energy in there and feel there's got to be so much energy flowing through that place. Some of the things that have happened there throughout time.
Yeah.
That's just something that's always really been something I wish I could do. But, going to Rome is a journey. It's got to be it's not a weekend trip.
No.
So eventually at some point I will definitely get over there. It's just a little busy to take a 2-week vacation right now.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. I mean, you've got to commit to really doing it right when you make that trip. That's not
for sure.
Jump off the bus, walk through it, and jump back on the bus and a flight home.
No. I'd like to do a whole tour if I could even.
Yeah, that'd be cool. So you go to Rome, you'd see the Colosseum. Any other bucket list things while you'd be there?
If I'm in Rome, obviously, or if I'm in that part of the world, man, I would love to go over and see the Eiffel Tower. I mean, that's kind of the easy tourist one, but it's something that, I feel like you got to say that you saw it at some point.
Yeah.
There's so much, and I could go on. There's so many cool things over there. Going to Ireland, going to the UK, seeing some of these really old places. That would be really cool. I mean, if I do go over there at some point, I'm definitely like I said, I'm making a 2-week deal out of it, and I'm jet setting and taking trains and seeing as much as I can because I don't know when the next time I'd be able to go back would be.
Right. All right, that's good. I did a short experience over in Europe, and I regret not just preparing a little bit more because there was so much history everywhere you went.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I stood in places that are, like in the Bible or in other literature, and I didn't realize it till after I was home and I read about it. I was like, oh, I literally was there and I didn't know the significance.
Yeah.
So
you'd need a whole itinerary if you're going to go over there.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, today I definitely want to dive into, I'm saying it long form here, but Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as both a sport. And I'd also like to understand your experience in it as a business owner of a gym. So, but before we get into all that stuff, let's just start at the very beginning. I know I skipped over a bunch when I went over your background history. Can you fill in some of the blanks there? What was your childhood
Sure.
like? Growing up in
Sure.
Michigan.
So I grew up in Michigan playing. I was always an athlete. I was always playing hockey or football or basketball. Hockey was my main sport. That's the one
Hmm.
that was my first true love that I was obsessed with. And it really taught me some stuff that I didn't realize I needed to know later in life about, what it takes to get good at something. And I think that's something that is huge in any child, especially a young man, learning that lesson of if I work hard and I put the work into it, I will get better. So that really was my start as far as athletics go. Went to college for a year at Saginaw Valley State University in Saginaw, Michigan. And, I had an opportunity to go out and move out here. My dad lived out here. And I had an opportunity to come out here and work. And it was as with most 18-year-olds, I had no idea what I want to do with my life. I have no
Yeah.
idea of, like, they say, hey, you got to go to college after high school, pick what you want to do for the rest of your life.
Right.
And I'm going, I have no idea. I want to be a professional athlete is what I really wanted to do. And I wanted to be a professional hockey player, but I was also at that point in my life coming to terms with the fact that that wasn't going to happen,
When
just
did you
skills
come to that
wise.
conclusion?
I would say I started coming to that conclusion when I started the year I went to that college. They started the college team. So I was able to play with that team for a little while or practice with them for a little while. And that's where I really saw, like, okay, there's a huge skill gap. And these guys aren't even high level college athletes. These are just, guys from around different schools from my area, the best guys they had. And I'm just, at some point you got to be objective with yourself and go, this isn't just not going to work.
Yeah.
So that kind of, it was on the back burner. It just became more of a hobby. And at that point, I'm like, all right, I definitely don't know what I want to do now. I'm going to school for criminal justice, basically because I just picked that because that sounded the coolest. So after a year, I've made a lot of good friends, had a lot of good times, had some good party experience for sure. But the opportunity came to move out to Colorado. And I was like, I like the potential here. I love the place. It sucks that I have to move away from the place I grew up in, but
Right.
I think it's the move. So I made the move out there, came out here, started working. I didn't really train at all. I had dabbled a little bit and I was definitely into jujitsu and martial arts and fighting, mostly like the UFC. But I was working construction. My dad owned a construction company. And that was really, I guess you would call it my career. It definitely wasn't my passion, but it was something that I'd found that I was pretty good at and I could make some decent money at and could kind of move up the ladder and got to be involved in some really cool stuff along the way. Got a lot of great life experience along the way, but it just wasn't, it's like anything. If you're not into it, you can only do it for so long before it starts to pull you down instead of push you up. And it just wasn't something I was interested in anymore. But at that point, I didn't really have the option to own a school, So I kind of
Right.
worked my way, just kept grinding without ever thinking I'm going to actually own a school. I mean, it's a pipe dream for sure, but when it
Sure.
happens, how it happens, I could have never predicted.
Gotcha. So when you said you moved to Colorado, was that before you started the martial arts or jujitsu, or did you do that in high school
So
or in college?
I did a little bit in high school and college. I wouldn't call it serious. It was more like I had gotten a hold of probably like most black belts my age. Say I got a hold of the UFC tapes when I was a kid, and I popped it in, and I'm like, what in the world is this? This looks like the coolest thing ever. So that actually, I want to say I was about 15 or 16. That actually started piquing my interest as something like I really am interested in this. But there really wasn't a way to train back then. I didn't have
Yeah.
gyms like we are today. Like if I got on Google right now, I could find 10 gyms within 15 miles of me
Right.
that would teach me everything that are great gyms. And I didn't have that. I had a punching bag in my basement and my cousins who were a little younger than me who didn't know anything that I could just kind of beat up on and do what I thought was
Let
air
me try
quotes
this move on you.
jujitsu. Right. But I really got into the striking aspect more first. I did a couple amateur boxing fights
Okay.
Went well, won them, did good. Like it was a good time, but I never really was like, I want to do martial arts for the rest of my life. It was just kind of something I was into. So long answer to your question, not really. Enough to be peaked, but not enough to stick with it.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. I was curious if you had any kind of background in it, but it sounds like you did at a pretty young age and you were gung ho into it. So did you have any, like stepping foot into a gym for the first time, did you have any confidence? Were you confident walking in there, or did you have any hesitations
Way
about getting
too
started?
much, way too much confidence
Yeah.
walking into a gym for the first time. I have, and just like anybody, I think everybody, every man that's never trained has an idea of what they can do. Like I have an idea of I can handle my own. And then you come in the first day and it's like, oh my goodness, I don't know anything. These guys are doing whatever they want to me. So it gave me a little bit of confidence, but almost too much confidence, I would say.
Yeah. Cool. I know personally I had the opposite experience. I was scared to death to set my foot in the gym and then find out that I'm going to survive and live another day. So I kind of
Gotcha.
had to start from the other end of the spectrum. But that's the amazing thing about the sport.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, BJJ, all these terms. For those listening that maybe aren't as experienced in the martial arts world or this particular sport, can you explain more about what it is?
Sure. What I typically start with people is, do you watch the UFC or do you watch MMA? And at that point, I'll know kind of where their knowledge level is. If the answer to that question is yes, I pretty much tell them when they're on the ground and they're not hitting each other, they're doing jujitsu, right? They're
Mm.
trying to grapple for different positions and get to submission holds or choke holds. If you don't watch UFC, if you don't watch MMA, it's very similar to wrestling, right? It's kind of a cousin to wrestling, where we start standing, there's no striking, but we're using takedowns to take our opponent to the ground. Or if they take us down, we're using our legs and our guard position to try to sweep them over and try to get on top or try to submit them. But the main goal, the only difference between wrestling and jiu-jitsu really is the goal. The goal in wrestling is to pin the person and put their back flat on the mat, which is a great skill set, but it is a little limiting when you're talking about if me and you were going to fight to the death. I'm not really able to pin you to death.
Right.
There's more to it than that. The goal in jiu-jitsu is to make your opponent submit, make them tap out. And on a low level scale, when we're talking about friends at the gym, we're just tapping, we're lightly applying these submissions, applying the chokes for real, but you're tapping when you're done. A life or death situation, or a situation where, you have to really use these techniques for real. You're talking about either damaging somebody's limbs or putting them to sleep, which is the preferred method if we're talking about self-defense, because most crazy people can still be crazy with a broken arm.
Mm.
They can't really do much when they're out cold, or when they're asleep, and you can get out of there. So that's kind of the basic synopsis of what jiu-jitsu is, kind of in a nutshell there.
Okay, great. Now that helps a ton, I think. How does, I think you've already talked about this, but I guess it's such a broad question. How does jiu-jitsu compare to other martial arts that are out there?
And when you say martial art, I want to make sure people understand that martial art has kind of gotten a bad rap over the years of being kind of like fake or being kind of not real or not realistic or doesn't work. That's because when you think martial art, most people, the first thing you say or you think when I tell you martial arts, maybe not you because you train jiu-jitsu, is karate, right?
When I was
Or
a kid, it was
taekwondo.
karate for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And you thought those guys were invincible when you watched them. You're like, no one could beat these guys. And no disrespect to karate at all, because karate is a fantastic martial art. And it's great for young children. It's great for teaching discipline. But if we're going to be honest, it's not the most practical for a life or death situation or defending your family or something like that. Saying that, I consider wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai, judo, these are all martial arts too. And all of those that I just named, if you walk in and you want to get good at one of those, it's going to be really hard, but it's going to be worth it because you will have a skill set that is very, very rare, regardless of what martial art you choose, as long as it's one that's effective. They're all great. They're all different, right? Boxing is just hands. I'm only punching you. Kickboxing, I'm only punching you and kicking you. Muay Thai, you've got elbows, knees, kicks, punches. Judo is another cousin to jiu-jitsu on the other side, where we wear the gi and we're trying to put our partner flat on our opponent flat on the back, but we're trying to throw them or trip them. We can't reach in and grab their legs and take them down like wrestling. But all those are fantastic martial arts. And a lot of them, if you watch MMA today, those are all integrated into these elite fighters' skill sets. Some of them are specialists, but now almost all of them are great at all those that I just listed.
Yeah. It seems like, though, once you get somebody to the ground, like you can be good at striking, but really everything defaults to BJJ unless you're taken out in a strike, right? Or is that a misconception there?
I mean, it depends on what your goal is. If your goal is if we're talking about a sanctioned fight where we have 3 rounds, and if I take you down and I keep you on the ground for 5 minutes and I win the round, then we go back to our stool and I take you down again and we rinse and repeat. You may not need jiu-jitsu. You may just need good, strong wrestling base. But if you're looking to finish the fight, right? Not that you can't finish the fight with strikes, but if you're looking to get a submission, yeah, you're right. It's typically like, that's why I tell people when they're on the ground, they're not hitting each other. It's pretty much jiu-jitsu. That's pretty much what you're going to see down there.
Yeah, cool. All right, thanks for all the knowledge on that. Even for me, I'm still learning this as a newer jiu-jitsu practitioner here. So, I guess the last question I have about the sport in the name itself is, we talk about BJJ or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in more common language. I just say, hey, I'm doing Jiu-Jitsu. What's the difference? What makes it Brazilian versus
it's
regular?
funny. Incredible marketing is what makes it Brazilian. So not that it wasn't. So Jiu-Jitsu doesn't actually come from Brazil. Jiu-Jitsu comes from Japan.
Right.
A guy named Maetsu Maeda. He brought he showed Jiu-Jitsu to Helio Gracie. That's kind of where it all started. And Helio started kind of evolving that a little bit, making it work for him because he was a smaller guy. And then at some point, it became Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like his version of it, right? And that was what came to the United States, mostly to California. I think Renzo Gracie went to New York, but mostly that first influx was in California. And they just marketed it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And pretty soon, we're still calling it that. And I still call it that. I mean, out of respect. I think, you got to have respect for your origins and how, if it wasn't for those guys, we wouldn't be here talking today. Right. Or it may be under a totally different set of circumstances with a totally different martial art,
Right. Or it'd be much more obscure, perhaps, like one of the other Japanese arts that
or an American would have gotten a hold of it, and called it American Jiu-Jitsu.
Right. AJJ.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I mean, I mentioned earlier, you recently earned your black belt in the last year. Is that right? Or has it been over a year now?
It was, no, it's coming up on a year.
Coming up on a year. Yeah.
Yep.
So what does that mean exactly in again, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? What does that mean to have your black belt?
Well, as a black belt, as somebody who's gotten there, it means a lot. It's a really impactful thing. I don't really see it as something that's making me better. I still have to do that myself. But to me, it was more of a show of not appreciation, but it's a coming together of all of the time that I put into it. All the injuries, all of the doubts, all of the sad nights where I get worked over on the mats all night long. And I'm like, oh my God, why am I still doing this? All these times where you're, there's a lot of good, but there's some rough times along the way, mentally, physically. You have to really sacrifice your body to become a black belt a lot of times. And I will tell you this, and you can ask any black belt, I'd do it over again in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat to have the journey that it takes to become a black belt, go through what it takes to become a black belt. It really means a lot to me. And that may not mean as much to somebody who maybe doesn't train. We all have different perspectives.
Sure. Somebody
who doesn't train may just see a white to black belt and be like, oh, you just got 5 belts. Like when I started jiu-jitsu, in my mind, in my overconfident mind, I was saying to myself, I'll probably just start as a blue belt. If it's, I'm just doing the math here, and I'm saying, all right, well, white is brand new. I'm not brand new. Eventually, white, blue, purple, brown, black. There's only 5 of them. How long could it take? And, a little over a year later, I get my my blue belt after being a white belt for a year or over a year. It totally changed your perspective. And once you realize how long it takes in the journey, you see some of these guys on the mat, you're like, okay, I respect the fact that you've been here this long and you haven't stopped and you haven't quit, because as well as anybody, you've trained long enough to know there's so many exits that you can take. There's so many turnoffs where you can go, I've had enough. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. But the guys who stick with it will always tell you it's so worth it. It's so worth it.
That is so great. So what was the amount of time from the time you put on your first white belt to putting on your black belt?
About 11 years.
11 years.
11
Yeah,
years. And
pretty
that's
big paradigm
consistent
shift.
training. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a life shift. It changes the way at least for me and some of, everybody's different. Everybody has different lives, different priorities in life. But I was a young man when I found jiu-jitsu. I was 22 years old and I really wanted to compete. I wanted to be the best and I wanted to beat everybody and prove to everybody that I was better than them. And that made me also change the way I live my life. Because if you could train 6 days a week if you want, and you can go compete every weekend if you want, but if you're eating crappy food and you're drinking too much alcohol and you're staying up too late, you're not drinking enough water, all these habits that I kind of had from not having kind of a moral guidance or moral compass to keep me pointed in the right direction, something to pull me, I could have easily had a terrible life, just partied my life away and been big fat slob and who knows. But jiu-jitsu brought me and it said, no, if you want to be good at this, you have to live your life outside the gym a certain way too.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you had some sort of mentorship or somebody in your ear or over your shoulder giving you that advice. What did that look like for you? Was there somebody that stood out to you and said, hey, you got to change your ways a little bit if you want to actually take this seriously?
A little bit. I definitely had some guys in the room that were more experienced. But honestly, when it came to that, I kind of just learned it as I went. I kind of just, life has a way of teaching you what it needs to teach you without anyone saying anything to you. If you're willing to listen, if you're willing to be, like, let me look around and observe what's going on here and how can I change this? So to answer your question, not particularly. No, I just I knew what I wanted and I knew I wanted to be good at this. And I'd found something for the first time since I stopped playing hockey. I found something that I really loved and I looked forward to all day and I was preparing for all day, every day. And like I had said before, I think that being an athlete like that before, and I also learned that when I was a kid, maybe not a kid, but in high school playing hockey, if you want to perform, you have to take care of your body and you have to put yourself in a position to succeed and not sabotage yourself and then look around like what happened when you fail. So I really think more than any mentorship, that might have been those previous experiences might have been the thing that kind of kicked that in my mind. Like, ooh, I recognize this. This is a thing I want to get good at. And I want to push myself at. So I have to go back into that way of living.
Yeah. I think that's so important for everybody listening here is just taking that time to self-audit, go back and say, what's working, what's not working, what could I do differently? And what lesson did I learn here? If you're not doing that, you're going to continue going down the same path or even a worse one, as opposed to giving it some critical thought and saying, oh, yeah, when I do this, I get smashed. And that can be analogous to a lot of things in life, right?
Absolutely.
But having the courage and taking the time to give yourself that feedback and then having the courage to make the change that you need to make an adjustment, test it and see if it helps. So it sounds like you've mastered that over the last 11 years for sure.
I don't know about master, but I'm working on it.
Well, good. Yeah. So who is jiu-jitsu for now? I mean, is this just for a young 22-year-old like yourself, like when you were, be kind of, very alpha, ready to go. Let's go in there and compete and take everybody down, be in good shape first, or what's your opinion on that?
So it's cliche, and I think some gyms already use it as a marketing ploy, but it's true. Jiu-jitsu is for everyone. Like you're a member at our school. You come to our school often, and you see, we have 4-year-old little girls on the mat. We have 13-year-old boys on the mat. We have 16-year-old boys. We have 22-year-old boys. We have 60-year-old men. We have 30-year-old women. We have every part of the population you could draw from. We have at least one or two of. And it really is for anybody. And if you find the right school, that's important because every school has a vibe when you walk into it. Some gyms, their vibe right away you feel is like you're a piece of meat and they're ready to kill you. They're ready to take you out. You got to watch that if that's not what you're looking for. And you can feel it. You can feel it for sure. I try to think that our gym is a vibe. You walk in and you feel welcomed. You feel like, okay, I can come here and learn, right? You could also, we have a lot of really good, solid alpha dudes like you're talking about too. So if you come in and you say, I want to go hard, we've got you covered. Come on in. We got guys for you. You can go hard. You can go crazy, whatever you want to do. But everybody in the room also knows what they're there for and what the other people are there for somewhat. Obviously they don't know everybody's journey, but we all get it. If the big 22-year-old alpha dude is not going to go over to the 60-year-old guy and go, let's roll and just kill him.
Right.
He'll go, let's roll. And then they'll just play. They'll just have a fun roll. And then the next roll, the alpha guy will come maybe find me and we'll go at it. We'll scrap. But it is for everyone. There's no one. If you find a good school, it doesn't matter how old you are. If you're overweight, if you drink too much, all these things that are limiting to you. If you come in and train, you try out jiu-jitsu and you love it, all that stuff will become way less important to you.
That's so true. I have to admit, my own experience here when I started. So I did it. Well, I don't know. There's no right and wrong. This is my experience. I started just before actually that you bought the gym and was in it for 6-7 months. And then when the big cough came around, the pandemic, and I had to put more attention, I chose to put more attention into my existing business and pulled out. And it took me 2.5 years to come back. I have to say, just in my experience of where I was ego-wise, that first 6 months, I was always down on myself. And I was always like, I keep getting crushed. I keep getting smashed. I enjoyed it, but I was still like holding back some kind of like ego there. And after, doing some personal work and then coming back in the gym, starting last fall, now it's just, I'm there to learn. I'm there. I mean, getting crushed is part of the game, and some small victories of learning a new move and it actually works in a live roll. That does so much, not for your ego per se, but just so much for your confidence and your well-being, I think, outside of the obvious, physical benefits. So it's been quite an interesting journey for me so far as well.
You're not alone, dude. That's why, every time I roll with a white belt, it doesn't usually go great for them. I'm not hurting them or anything, but they're not going to win. It's the way it is. I tell people all the time, if you came in here and you tapped me out the first night we trained, this is all bullshit. Like, why are we even here then?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. That's not how it works. But I will always tell them. And if I see a white belt or somebody getting smashed a little bit, I'll make sure they know that you're not alone, dude. You're not the only one this has happened to. It's happened to every single person in this room that's not a white belt anymore. It's happened. Don't be down on yourself. Just keep going. If you keep coming, you get these, it's just like lifting weights or any sort of activity. You work at it and you work at it and you work at it and you feel like you're not seeing any results. And you're like, I don't understand why this isn't. Boom. And then you get this big jump and you're like, oh crap, I am better. I just got better. How did this happen? And then you just keep going and then you just keep jumping and jumping and jumping. And pretty soon, if you stay at it, you're going to be anywhere in 10 years. Why not be a black belt too?
Right. Yeah. It's such a long game. People think it's, like you said earlier, get the belts, check the box, and move on to the next thing in life. And this is definitely the long game.
Yeah, for sure. You're not gonna, if you show up and your main goal is to get a black belt when you first show up, you're probably not gonna last. It's just such a grind. But if you're like me, like I was, and like most of the guys who are higher belts with us that train, they're not really thinking about that. They just want to come train with their friends every night. This is just part of our life. We just train every night. That's what we do. And before you know it, you're like getting better. And 2-3 years have gone by and you're getting your next belt. And the 2-3 more years go by and you're a black belt. And like, holy crap, this was the most fun journey ever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. It's one of the other benefits in just such a short time, particularly in your gym, but I'm sure there's other gyms out there like this. The camaraderie is almost instant. you roll with somebody once or twice and you guys are buddies, like you're going to go to war for each other or protect each other or whatever, like I'm using a little bit more alpha male verbiage there, but even I think for the ladies, like there's a brotherhood, sisterhood there that is almost instant in the right gym.
Oh, 100%. I can tell you now, when I started training, I had whatever group of friends, 15, 20 buddies of mine that none of them trained. And now that I've been training for 12 years, I can tell you most of those people I don't really have contact with anymore because you don't have that same, you realize after a while, once you have some real meaningful relationships with it, like you said, if me and you are going to battle and we're rolling hard and we're trying to submit each other, neither one of us are angry. We're not mad at each other. We're just doing the sport. But once you have that battle with somebody, you respect them and you go, okay, this person is down. He's here with me, helping me get better. I'm protecting him. He's protecting me. We're not trying to hurt each other.
Yep.
And boom, I got a friend for life now. I could tell you every friend I have in my life right now that I consider one of my best friends, with the exception of maybe one or two, are all at that gym. And we started at Colorado Springs BJJ together 10 plus years ago, most of us. And we've been super tight friends ever since. And like you said, I do anything for those guys. I do anything for any of our students. That's the beautiful thing is, from my perspective, you guys have, friends and stuff in the gym. I have all these people, and now I have all these families and all these, like, it's hard to manage sometimes, but it really does mean a lot to me to be a part of all these lives and to see these kids grow up and to see guys come in overweight, depressed, alcoholic, whatever their issues are, problems at home, and they come here and they train and they feel better about themselves when they leave. That means a lot to me. And it really makes me feel like we're doing something big here,
Yeah, that's powerful. I guess I hadn't even considered that perspective from an owner, head coach owner, of having that perspective on all the people and the impact that the sport and your gym is having on their lives.
For sure. And it's, it can be heavy sometimes. If I'm being honest, there's a lot of times where I've had people in my office, just me and them, and we're having some really heavy conversations about their life and what's going on with them and stuff. And, sometimes I feel underqualified to be talking to people about this kind of stuff. But if they trust me to maybe not give them guidance, because I may not be an expert in the subject, but just as someone to talk to and someone who's not going to judge them and somebody who wants to see them succeed genuinely. And I don't have a rooting interest either way. I'm not a member of their family. I'm not, you know what I mean? You start to build these relationships over years with certain family members or certain people, and you already know, they might judge you for this or judge you for that. You don't really want to talk about it. But I've had a lot of really tough conversations with people about stuff that's going on in their lives. And sometimes, I give them advice and they do it and it works and it feels great. It makes me feel a lot better to see them doing well too.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So I want to talk about the business aspect of things before we completely finish here. You said you had this idea that you wanted to be a coach, you wanted to be an owner at some point, and was it 5 years, or how long did it take you to take that leap?
Well, to think about wanting to have a school someday, it didn't take me that long because I started teaching when I was a blue belt.
Okay.
So I started teaching at my school, covering. My coach was having some medical problems, so he was gone for an extended period of time. And at that point, I was a blue belt, closing in on my purple belt. But I had gained trust and respect in the room, and people wanted to see what I could teach them, whatever it might have been in my blue belt self. But I did it, and I was like, all right, well, somebody's got to do this. I'll help. So I started teaching, and right away I started feeling those connections we were talking about, where you're like, I'm seeing people come in nervous, can't do any moves at all, can't do a shrimp, can't do a roll, can't do anything. And then 2 weeks go by, boom, they're nailing it. And I'm like, that is really, really satisfying. I want to do that more. But when you think about, opening a gym, the amount of capital that you need to start that, just to be risk averse, to have enough, you buy all your mats. Mats are some of the most expensive things ever. I don't know if you've ever bought mats before.
No,
but
I haven't.
For a 6x3 piece of mat, which is one of the mats at our gym, is $125. So you start multiplying that out, and if you're starting a school, you don't have any students, you don't have any revenue. You got to lease the space. You got to buy the mats. You got to have enough cash flow to survive for 6 months or whatever it is. It was just not really at that point in my life, I'm doing construction. I've got a couple $1,000 in my bank account. Like, I'm not going to open a gym. It's just not going to happen. It's just a dream. But I would say, like, long answer to your question, probably 3 years in, I started thinking about it.
Okay. How did you overcome that? At some point, you did buy Kraken. Was that your first gym that you did buy?
Yeah.
Or
So that was
business?
my first business I had owned. I had been lucky enough, like I said, I worked with my dad. He ran a super successful company. He's a great businessman. I got to see him operate, and I got to help him as I got older kind of run his business. So I got a huge leg up there in terms of the business aspect of it. I wasn't just a meathead coming into jiu-jitsu that only knew jiu-jitsu. But as far as the gym goes, it came completely out of left field, completely out of thin air. I had kind of, I don't know if you want to call it burned out, but I had just kind of gotten this weird like funk where I just wasn't really enjoying training. I wasn't enjoying going to the gym and training anymore. And I'm like, well, this is an issue. I got to figure out how to fix this.
Yeah.
So I popped into right down the street from my house, Kraken. And Carlos, who you know, obviously, he had trained with me previously at the last gym I was at forever. We started together. So I hit up Carlos and I said, hey, Carlos, you mind if I pop in tonight and train? Came in, trained with their guys. I had a great time, left, thought, I might maybe want to join the gym. Like, I might want to come here and train. And then I get a message from Carlos saying, hey, I had a conversation with the owner of the gym. He's kind of looking to move on from this and do other things. He had another business going in Denver. Yep. Would you be interested in taking the gym or buying the gym? Would you want to do that? And if you are, I will pass your info along to him. And that's one of those moments, and you've probably had several where you go, whoa, like, oh boy.
Yeah.
You know what the right answer. I knew the right answer. The answer was yes. The answer was yes. 1,000,000%. But in my mind, I start putting up all the reasons why I shouldn't do it, all the possible failures, all the things that are going to be in my way, and how do I manage this, and how do I do that? So I had a good 48 hours of just battling with that. And every time I would ask the question to myself, I would say, you already know the answer, stupid. You know the answer. You're just scared. Don't be scared. Just do it. This is what you're never, ever going to have an opportunity like this presented to you ever again. A gym that's currently operating full of mats and has students to start with on a silver platter for you. Take it. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. And I did it. I sat down with the old owner. We had some talks, some deal making. We came to an agreement. And January 1st, 2020, I know, a great time, right? I took over Kraken Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. Right before the world ended.
Yeah, that wasn't something that I actually had thought about when I made that agreement. Because it hadn't really become a big deal.
Yeah.
No, when we had the agreement in place.
Not at all. Not at all. There was just faint whispers, if that, at that point.
But you know what that taught me is all the different things you could say, what if? None of those even mattered because a brand new what if that I didn't even think about popped up.
The worst case scenario happened.
The worst case scenario popped up. And what did we do? We didn't keep training. We had some time off, but through that, we kept growing. Our student base kept growing and kept growing and kept growing. Just another one of those lessons you teach yourself, like don't underestimate what you can do if you really want something.
That is so good. And it even reminds me of what you said about somebody that might be newer beginning and they start training, and it doesn't matter whether it's jiu-jitsu or any other sport, but you're doing the thing, and you just put your head down and put the reps in, and then boom, you either get like an upgrade in your abilities or boom, life gives you that upgrade. In that case, you were working, you were still training, you were still going through the motions, you were on the side learning about business from your father's business, and then boom, life gives you that opportunity, that upgrade, and it was time to jump. So
yeah. They say luck is when preparation meets opportunity, right?
Absolutely. I think that is a great story. Now, if you could pull yourself aside and go back to your younger self, maybe back to the 22-year-old version of you, what would be the most meaningful advice you'd give him today?
That's a good one. That is a good one. I would say and it's something that I think every young man deals with. I don't know that it hurt me, but I do know mentally it's harder to go through everyday life. I would tell that person to not care so much about what everybody thinks. There's people in your life that you need to care what they think, for sure. You need to be able to take what they say, and maybe you don't agree with it, but you need to hear them. You need to hear them out. But there's so many people, especially at that age, that I was just so worried about what these people who don't even know me think, or I don't even really know
Yeah.
think, or so and so is going to think I'm this, or so and so is going to think I'm that, and it pollutes your mind with all this nonsense, and it makes it so hard to focus. Which 2022, just like when I was 22 years old, we didn't have TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all these things that now steal our focus.
Yeah.
Back then, I didn't have those things. So if I could go back and I could take some of that focus away from all these people who don't matter and put it more on myself, not in a selfish way, but more in a, how am I going to make my life the way I want it? Like, how do I build my life the way I want it to be? And the people I care about and those opinions I care about are going to be pulled right into my bubble. And that's where I'm going to stay mentally. I'm going to stay in my bubble with all my people. And what all these other people's opinions and everything else is going to bounce right off of it. I'm going to stay focused.
Yeah, it's so good. We don't give ourselves enough credit about how powerful we are. And when we give other people power, even inadvertently, instead of staying within our own lane and worrying about what we can control, we're really cutting ourselves short. So that's definitely great advice.
Big time. And it's still I think every human being deals with it still, regardless of how much you tell yourself it doesn't matter. You have those little moments where you're going to do something or you're doing something and you're like, oh man, how's this going to look? Or what are people going to think of this? And I think relating this to a business aspect, that still rings true today, because a lot of things, especially with the business, it's about your brand and it's about how people perceive you and what do people see when they see your brand. But it's still got to be who you are. It's not what they want. If it's who you are, you don't have to constantly worry about it and change it and do anything. As long as you're not doing anything illegal and you're not doing anything wrong, make your business who you are, and the people who are in line with that will find you. And the people who aren't will go find other places, and that's okay too.
Yep. So true. One last question I have for you here in this vein is, what would be one simple action or tip that our listeners could implement in their lives, whether it be inside the gym or outside the gym, that would most expand their boundaries today?
I'm going to go on a health one here, and I'm only going to do it because I know the chain reaction it will have. Drink
Okay.
more water. Drink more water. I would say 75% of the people in this world walk around dehydrated, and they don't realize it because they're too busy or they just don't make it a priority. But when you start drinking the proper amount of water and you start hydrating yourself, great things start happening. You start burning more fat. You start having more energy. You start eating a little bit better because now you have more energy. You can go work out. You start feeling like, I got to take care of myself a little better. You sleep better, right? You perform better when you do work out, right? All these things will start to come if you just go like, I'm not one of the bros that walks around with a giant gallon of water every day or anything, but I do drink a gallon of water every day. I definitely do. And that's something that I've done for a long time. And once you start doing it and you suddenly you miss on it for a couple days, you go, oh, this is how I used to feel. Holy
So
crap.
true.
I feel terrible. I need to drink more water. But it's just like anything. You got to build the habit. And at first it kind of sucks. You feel like you're drowning yourself,
Yeah.
but it's worth it.
Yeah. I often go through seasons where I get up to about a gallon a day. And I have to say, like, that last, either the third and or fourth quart, the water starts to taste sweeter as you go. It's really an odd thing that I didn't
Right.
expect.
It's also too, I would say it helps when you're exercising vigorously. You're doing something that
Mhm.
makes you sweat, because all that hydration, as you take a nice gulp of water, I love it. And all that hydration starts to push water out of your body. It stops you from retaining water. That's the thing people don't realize. They're like, I'm retaining water. I can't drink any more water. Like, no, you have to do the opposite. Drink more water. Then your body's not going to say, holy crap, this is all the water we have. This is all we're getting. We better
Yeah.
hold
Hang
on to
on.
this and keep this. No, it gets this big influx of fluid, and it goes, all right, we can let go of this. We can just flush this. and you'll see, I don't know, next time we roll, pay attention to how much I'm sweating. There's a lot of sweat, but I feel like it's, it's a good little process. Every day you drink your gallon, you sweat like crazy, you replenish, and it just kind of keeps you flowing.
Yep, 100%. That is such simple, but great advice, and probably as universal as it gets as far as the impact it can have on people. So, Tyler, how can our listeners here connect with you or find you?
Sure. So you can go to our website, bjjkraken.com, Kraken. Find us on Instagram, bjjkraken, Facebook, Kraken BJJ and Fitness, or just Google us. You'll be able to find us easy there.
All right. Well, that wraps up our show today. Thank you so much for being on here, Tyler. It was a pleasure. Apparently, I can talk about martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu all day long, but we don't have that much time. But thank you for being here today.
Yeah, it was great being on. Hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, I hope so too. Well, I'll just share this before I completely end the show here. For those of you listening, please think about one big idea that you heard on the show today, or some takeaway that you got for yourself. And then take some kind of action, big or small, even start working towards another glass of water, and go ahead and get out there and expand your boundaries. And lastly here, please, as I mentioned at the beginning, share this episode with at least one person that you think could be helped by this show by listening to Tyler and his wisdom and his experience. Share it on social media, share it with a friend. That would be a big help to me and the show. And if you do have the time, we'd love it to see if you would make a review for us here. So thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.